Seems quiet.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. This is the Fort Myers Beach Town Council Management and Planning Session on this Thursday, January 21st, 2021. Time is 10:38. We had a joint meeting with all the committee chairs prior to this meeting, and now we're getting on with our planning session. So we'll begin, as always, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. The first item for discussion is the Lee County update. And this is a written report which we all received, primarily about the road work, but we'll open it up if anybody has any questions or comments or anything they want to add to it. It's a pretty concise report. It's for those at home. It's all about the status of the road projects out on the boulevard, also the stormwater project going out to the bay. Do you want to add anything? Roger, do you want to add anything to this, or?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I would like to just mention, I think perhaps what is the most important thing, and that is that the report supports the county's plan to be completed by the end of 2021.
Made note of that.
Which I'm sure many people on the south end would be happy to hear, that there is an end in sight. Things that have come up that are not in their report but are related to the report. So if there are no comments about their report, I could leap into those.
I think that bears repeating one more time, that the county agreed that the project will be substantially completed by the end of 2021.
It's been their stated objective from day one.
Yes. Okay. So let that be known throughout the town, that there are people that have said that it's going on for another year after that, and I've heard that, and it's incorrect. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So two unrelated matters that have come up since the county's issued their report. And one of them was earlier today. That is this concept of marking the sidewalks to designate that pedestrians should tend to stay on one half of the sidewalk and bicycles should be on the other half. Again, the interlocal that was referred to would then transfer that responsibility to the town to do that marking versus perhaps us encouraging Lee County government to do that marking like they're doing all the other markings associated with the project. So I just mentioned that to you, that if the council's position is you want us to take on that responsibility and to negotiate a interlocal agreement, whereas we would be responsible for placing those markings and maintaining those markings and any other insulated issues with regard to those markings, we can do that if that's the council's policy. So that's issue one. Issue two is that as the project has progressed, there in some locations there's an area between the curb of the sidewalk, the edge of the road, and the sidewalk, and the county has been putting in what I call highway grass to fill that area, so that there's no drop off and it's not a drainage problem, in advance of perhaps a future more enhanced landscaping program, which we have negotiated into local agreement, and we would be taking on that responsibility once the county completes their project. However, in the interim, some of the individual homeowners have requested that in lieu of grass, have whatever surface they have on their private property. So if they have rock, they're asking for rock. If they have shell, they're asking for shell. Versus the project plan, which is basically to put this grass in those areas. We received an inquiry from the county to see if we had a position on it. And so I wanted to raise it to the five of you, for you to be able to give it some thought and perhaps at a subsequent meeting, if you're not ready today, to give me some input about that.
Talk about today?
I could start. As to the sidewalk markings, my preference would be that we take it as our responsibility. I think we have a quicker response time if something needs to be fixed or is fading or updated or whatever, and I don't see it to be a huge budgetary item for us to be taking on. As to the curb and sidewalk, I would hesitate to have the property owners use the same as what they have in their yards, because people then, as properties change and new owners move in, they grow to believe that that is their property because it matches their yard. And we've already had problems with people filling in swales on the island when it wasn't their property, et cetera. I'd also like to make sure we entered into the agreement because one of the things we wanted to make sure we were doing is putting in native plantings. Homeowners are uneducated and put in things that are invasive. So I would just prefer that we keep control of those areas. That way we're doing what is in the best interest of the town, I think.
I would just, the mayor's point earlier, it's really not related to Roger's immediate question, but it's really related to the broader question of the markings of the sidewalk. I don't know what the answer is, but I think we ought to spend some time thinking about it. I'm glad the Public Safety Committee's thinking about it. Very sensitive to what the mayor said about somebody walking along the sidewalk and somebody coming up on them with a bike at a fast speed. It's a problem. But at the same time, I wonder if there's a way too that we could be sensitive to the fact that those bike lanes, some of them are great, some of them get pretty narrow. With high curb right next to it, people are reticent to be out there on a bike for a variety of reasons, for their own public safety concerns. And I just wonder if there's a way to be lenient on those bikes that do utilize the sidewalks when there are no pedestrians. For example, if you come up, I don't know how you'd ever enforce this, but if you come within 100 feet of a pedestrian, you should have to get off your bike and walk your bike. I mean, but being able to utilize those sidewalks when no one is around, from a safety standpoint, is appealing for a bike. But it's something to think through. But I do want to be respectful of the pedestrians on those sidewalks, and I think bikers ought to be. But oftentimes those sidewalks are completely vacant, and it's so much safer to be on that sidewalk on a bike than it is on that street. Really, when that bike lane narrows, there's got to be a compromise somewhere. I don't know what it is, but it's just something we ought to be thinking about.
Councilman Atterholt, I can tell you that in the Public Safety Committee, they've discussed some of that a little bit. A lot of the issues, the bike lane is not, as a pedestrian or bike rider or vehicle driving, not everybody knows that that's what that is. I mean, it's very spread out as to that's a dedicated bike lane. To some people, it looks like it's just a shoulder that they can pull over on. And I'm sure we've all seen cars that are just driving right through the buses. And so there was discussion about changing the color of that and maybe adding some more bikes with some reflective tape. Down in Naples, they use a very bright green. It sticks out. And there was some discussion. There was a company that was willing to come in and do a pilot program, and it was going to be for free on the north end of the island. And COVID came in, and that kind of went away. So, to answer, I guess, some of your question is that was an alternative that was looked at. I would like to hopefully pursue that, because that would really make that stand out. That people know that that's where bikes belong, whether you're driving, whether you're walking, and maybe that would alleviate some of the concern of riding your bike on the sidewalk. I understand your point that sometimes you have to or you feel more safe, but I think if we can look at that, and I mirror the comments that Vice Mayor said about taking that in-house and trying to control that, because that's something we see every day, we deal with every day, and I don't believe it'd be a huge cost to provide that service. But I just wanted to add my 2 cents on that.
I think that's well said. Yeah, thank you.
With respect to Council Hour's comment, company, we are in touch with that company. We're getting to the point where they're contemplating coming back, so those discussions are being reignited.
Excellent. If there's anything we can do, please let me know.
I would kind of, on these two items, marking a bike path on the sidewalk is all good and fine, but I think that one of the realities of people's personality is that the tourists are going to largely ignore. If you have 4 people and you're walking down the road, everybody wants to be abreast and you're just going to walk abreast. The conflict that the mayor pointed out is usually when someone comes up behind somebody. That's when you see a conflict. And the other thing is bicycles are not all created equal because, I ride a road bike and I can go 18 miles an hour and I'm not getting on the sidewalk. When you have a beach cruiser who's going 5-6 miles an hour, it's usually not much of a problem. But then you put the e-bike in there and these beach cruisers can now go, 17, 18 miles an hour. You create a real conflict. And I have some concerns as you paint a bike path on the sidewalk, they're going to treat that like it's a road. They're going to be more assertive. They're riding on that path.
And I don't think the discussion was about doing the entire sidewalk on both sides down the island. It was in the areas where there is no bike lane or the road. So I don't think that it would be the entire length of the island that was being discussed. And as I said before, I think with enhancing the visibility of the bike lane that is there, will bring awareness. We obviously can't control what every tourist does that comes to the town, but I think that would be a good step in leading people in the right direction.
I mean, there are some, the definite advantages I see is it does provide some order for the bicycles. They should know where to be. And also, you put markings on there so they're going the right direction. So you don't have a conflict of people going different directions. And, I think riding an e-bike on the sidewalk in the wrong direction is an extremely dangerous activity for somebody to do. As far as a parking strip, I appreciate what the vice mayor said. The kind of a two-edged thing. What they're putting in is not necessarily native grasses. I'm not sure what they are, but it seems like it's got quite a variety of different plants that kind of pop up in that.
We're going to be able to fix that.
Yeah. The other side is that there's a lot of people that may want to take out the grass and plant native plants. I do think there's a risk to, like I say, giving the local some control over it because there's also line of sight issues. Wants to put some, it has to be a lot of control over it, and it has to be done in perpetuity so that someone doesn't do something and then sell the house and leave the owner with the wrong impression.
I have a question for the attorney. What is our exposure, John, from the town's point of view, liability, putting bicycles up on the sidewalk and dedicating a lane for them?
Well, sidewalks are actually the counties, unless the major ones that we're talking about, obviously on Estero Boulevard. So any decision to go ahead and to formally mark those would require, as the manager indicated, interlocal with the county, and then there becomes an issue of potential liability. We just by way of information or example, through the course of the ongoing construction and just the existence of those sidewalks, people who find themselves being injured or otherwise involved in some type of accident almost automatically include the town in such claims, and we have had to deal with those. And our standard response through our outside insurance company, the League of Cities, is to assert and point out that we don't exercise control and ownership over that sidewalk, and have used that effectively and legally to avoid liability. So once we get into the potential management of the sidewalks, that may change. As far as the issues, there's designated bike lanes, and by state law, the people on bicycles have the right to use the right-of-way, subject to compliance with all the laws. And as it relates to pedestrians, they're, just like vehicles, are supposed to cede the right-of-way to the pedestrians. If they don't, then they may be determined to ultimately be liable if there's a subsequent claim. They're just like vehicles. sidewalks, when they're on sidewalks, they have to yield the right-of-way to that sidewalk to the pedestrians. It is not unheard of, and I have seen it in other jurisdictions where, particularly with wider sidewalks, they designate an area for bicyclists, skateboarders, whatever, stay to this side, pedestrians walking this side, and pedestrians have the right-of-way.
Well, I referenced California earlier because I'm familiar with that, Southern California. That's very popular out there on the Strand down there, where they have designated bikes, designated walk, and it works. It works for them. I don't know whether it will work here or not, but and I'm concerned about that liability aspect. Once we enter into these agreements, now we're involved. As it is now, they can sue anybody, and as John just told us, and those are thrown out the town's portion because there's no liability there. But once we start getting involved as a direct partner in these agreements, now we're brought in, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous, and I've had lots of close calls myself. So anyhow, but I will tell you though that there are also respectful bicyclists. I've seen them come down. And you talk about these big wide sidewalks where no one's walking. I've seen these guys. They come down. They're on the street, and then they go up on the sidewalk, and they drive down, pedal down or don't pedal, whatever they're doing, and down the sidewalk, and they see somebody else, and they go back out in the road. It's just smart, because most of this that I'm seeing is down in the construction zones, and frankly, I think it's suicidal for a lot of these bicyclists to be out in these construction zones, but that's just me. But anyhow, there are some respectful ones, but the problem is we have people from all over and everywhere, and as we say, are unfamiliar with the rules and so forth, and bike rentals and this and that, and it's challenging. It's challenging, but I think when things die down in the off season, I'm sure it'll be less of a burden on us. But these are all things to consider, and I'll let it go at that.
I was just going to ask a quick question based upon your comment. Roger and John, I happen to be one of these bicyclists that the mayor just referenced, where I'm in the bike lane, but if I see a completely vacant sidewalk for 3 or 4 blocks, I'll get back up on the sidewalk. I see a pedestrian, I get back in the bike lane or in the street or across the street. I try to avoid them. My question is just procedurally today in Fort Myers Beach, if a bicyclist is on the sidewalk, are they in violation of a town ordinance or any sort of issue?
No, the only regulation we have with regard to that is that we have a regulation that says you need to have lights and a bell. We have a regulation that says you can't have an e-bike operating in motorized mode on the sidewalk.
That's it?
I mean, we have a longer ordinance, but
But I mean,
in terms,
but a bicyclist who uses the sidewalk, particularly when they're not
if they're complying with
infringing upon a pedestrian
the
incapacity,
if they're
that's okay?
complying with the state and county and town laws as it pertains to bicycles, you're allowed to ride your bicycle on the sidewalk.
Very good. I did not know that. That's good to know. Thank you.
I can now have we ever had a conversation with the county to try to encourage them to do this? Because my understanding, particularly the area that like Councilman Allers was talking about, the downtown area where there is no bike lane, that their solution is to make it a shareway where they're encouraging bikes to be in the road. So I was wondering if we had a conversation with the county asking them to look at doing this, or you even put up signs.
Well, I think it's been raised to the county, but I will say this, I don't know that council has taken not a hard position, but it's taken an official position and officially has requested that the county do this. It's been discussed at the staff level. County tends to say that we have this sort of a basic level of service of things that we do, and if you want anything above that, you have to take on the responsibility of doing it and assume the responsibility. But, well, hopefully, there have been some changes in the last couple of years on the county commission, and maybe they're more receptive to some of these requests from the town.
I think if we could take the north part of the island that I was discussing earlier, and that the town manager was talking about with that company that could do that as a pilot program, maybe then that gives us something that we can take to the county and show them, this is what we've done, this seems to be working, something that you can do. Maybe that could be a start of the negotiation, just a thought.
Is there a bike path all the way down the north end, though? There aren't shared sidewalks there.
Right, but I'm talking about changing the markings to the glow in the dark, make it more prominent, the sticking out.
So you're not talking about painting
On the
the
sidewalks,
sidewalk
no,
thing?
no, and, maybe that leads to that, I don't know, but I don't know if you do change the colors and you make it more prominent that it is a bike lane, that it's necessary to put it on the sidewalks as well.
I'm concerned about the area of town where there is no bike path and you're forced to share the sidewalk. I'd like to see markings there so that people get used to the idea that pedestrians on this side and bikes are on the other. I walking in the pedestrian area would feel safer knowing that that's where I'm supposed to be and I'm out of the way of the bicycles personally.
If I may, as we're discussing, so everyone is clear, Chapter 316 Florida statutes, for subsection is 2065. Subsection 10, a person propelling a bicycle upon and along a sidewalk or across a roadway upon and along a crosswalk shall yield the right-of-way to any pedestrian and shall give an audible signal before overtaking and passing such pedestrian. To the point of marking the sidewalks, in a vacuum, one would presume that any local government, including Lee County, that exercises ownership and control over that sidewalk, would think that it would be smart to mark the sidewalk in order to be able to potentially, in a court action, be able to say, we specifically designated an area over here to this side for the bicycles and for over here for the pedestrians to avoid this exact situation. But that's up to the government agency that exercises that control and ownership.
I just, based on the time I've spent on council in the past, have found that whenever we ask the county to do anything, they rarely are interested, and we only succeed in achieving our goals as a town by saying, look, okay, then we'll do it. That's been my past experience. I'm not against saying the council going to the county and saying, look, we'd like this to happen, will you do it? We could ask them first. I just think it's going to delay the process, and it's already been delayed so long.
I'm a fan of it never hurts to ask, and so far my dealings with the county commission have been very positive, and they've been open and receptive. Now, doesn't mean any decisions are going to be made, but it seems that there's a willingness to work with us with these things. I'd be in favor of reaching out, if it's the will of the council, to ask if they'd be willing to do something.
Well, as recently as the plantings along the sidewalk, where we asked for native plantings, they were completely uncooperative about taking any suggestion from us on. That's the last time I think that we went to them, and that's fairly recently.
Well, again, I'm not saying that everything is we're not going to get everything we ask for, but if you don't ask, you don't know.
I'm not against asking, but I do believe that in the area where there isn't a bike path, I think it's important that we mark the sidewalk. The whole plan of doing the extra wide sidewalks was because we didn't have room for the bike path. So, and I think John makes a good point. In litigation, you can then point to the fact of, we tried to keep people separate.
Couldn't they argue, John, that they're trying to do that now because the bike lane is the roadway?
Talking about where there is no bike lane.
Well, the law doesn't say that you have to use the bike lane if it's there as opposed to the sidewalk. It's frankly silent. One would assume or presume that that's what people would do, but I personally have observed people here in Fort Myers Beach ride the sidewalk even when they're in an area where there is a marked bike path on Estero Boulevard.
I think part of that is because we've had so much construction. You never know when you ride down the street where you're going to be able to ride your bike. So after the construction is over, I think we'll be able to educate the public, please use the bike lanes. In the area where we don't have one, it would be good to keep the two groups of people separate. It was actually contemplated in those areas that that's where the bikes would be, was on the sidewalk.
Roger, have we put anything out, or have we had the PIO put anything out as far as drawing or where bike lanes are existent and not existent, or anything on our feed as far as public information? Or can we do that?
Well, no, not to my knowledge that I can specifically recollect, but we can work on that if you'd like us to do that. I think my first stop would be to talk to Kay, sort of part of the project PR. That here's where the bike lanes are, here's where the sidewalks are, here's the areas that are under construction, to avoid. And, then from there to try to augment that town effort.
I think it could be very helpful, because I've noticed people are loving the sidewalks and the bike. I've seen more people this year using the sidewalks and the bikes than bike lanes than I've seen every time I've been here. So, I think the more information we can get them, however we get that to them, would be beneficial.
Just to put a period on this, or exclamation point, people have to remember is that Fort Myers Beach, like everywhere else in these United States of America, pedestrians have the right of way, always. That's good to remember.
I still don't feel that Roger has guidance from us as to whether he's approached the county about painting, and he doesn't have guidance from us about the curb sidewalk area as to whether we're letting people put stuff that matches their yard. Do you feel you have guidance, Roger?
Well, I wanted to bring these issues to your attention. I didn't necessarily want to hijack the meeting, but if you're ready to reach a consensus about that today, then clearly I will operate on that consensus. If you're not, we can schedule this for a subsequent detailed discussion at another date, whatever you prefer.
Personally, I don't think, the grass, it is what it is. I don't know if I'd be in favor of allowing every homeowner to put what they want out there. I'd worry about the shells I have in Pebble Rock I have in my yard, and it can be very messy, very slippery, I'd be worried about them getting on the sidewalk, getting in the street, and then you're dealing with cleanup issues. And I would not be in favor of allowing homeowners to match their yard, if you will. That direction enough for me?
So with that said, so far, just to get back to the vice mayor's point, I've heard the vice mayor advocate for keeping grass, at least for now. I've heard Councilman Veach advocate for keeping the grass for now, if I heard him correctly, and I just heard Council Allers also advocate for keeping the grass for now.
The other side is, what if someone wants to take that grass out and put in native vegetation?
We're going to get there. We have an interlocal for us to take care of that.
Okay, so that's basically, I know, so what you're saying right now is the initial installation.
Yes.
My understanding is what Roger was asking is, are we going to allow homeowners to match their yards? And that's what I feel like we need to be telling him, no, don't be telling people that they can do that.
And what I'm saying is just part of clarification. What if your yard is native grasses? You want to put native grasses on your little parking strip, or some other kind of native plant?
Well, I think one of the longstanding issues, Councilor, that I've run into here is the very issue that the vice mayor raised, that because we don't get, homeowners just think, well, the right of way is mine and I can plant or do whatever I want in it, is an educational issue that we need to work on, because not that we object to them planting native plants safely in the right of ways in front of their property, but we want to make sure that they're not doing non-native planting things that, well, may look good to them, but could cause a problem of a driveway opposite that, trying to back out of their driveway and things of that nature. So, no, I don't want to say that we want to permit it, because I know that'll send everyone over the edge, but I do think that we want to maintain some level of control about it.
So I guess my kind of feeling is allowing the existing grass to go in is the safest bet right now, because you open a can of worms if you go with allowing too much flexibility, even if some of that flexibility is for the benefit. But yeah, I probably concur.
Your direction.
Yes, sir.
I'm all for the grass, too. Turf, excuse me. Okay.
As far as the bicycle, have direction on that, Roger?
Well, on the bicycle issue, my suggestion would be that rather than us solving the problem today, is what we do is you write the county a letter signed by the mayor that we discussed it today, and that the council is, at this point, is encouraging the county to address where there's no bike lane, potential conflict between bicyclists and pedestrians, and see what letter or correspondence we get back. We'll then share that with you all, and then we can then react to that and decide what we want to do. If you
Like
all are
that.
comfortable with that,
That's a good
we can
approach.
proceed on that basis.
That's a good approach.
And that should be something that within we get the letter out within a week, those should get back to us within a week or two, and by next month's MP, we should hopefully be ready to see what they're going to do and say and act accordingly.
Bit of cooperation. We're starting at a local level here, what we hope will happen nationally.
I think cooperation and in the spirit of public safety. In that
There
letter.
you go. There you go. Okay.
One now we're talking about bicycles. The idea now, I think you mentioned that our regulations that the bicycles have to have lights and a bell or some kind of audible.
Yes, our local bicycle ordinance, I believe, requires that.
Now, the rental companies conform to this? I mean, do the rental bikes have bells?
When that amendment was made to our ordinance, a copy of the ordinance, once it was finalized, was provided to every single bicycle company at least twice.
Okay, and
And I can tell you that they don't.
I know when you do get the bicycle pedestrian interactions, the friendliest way is you have a bell. You whisper, if you come up behind somebody and whisper, sometimes they jump right out of their skin. It doesn't have a problem with the bell. So another idea, and instead of, I appreciate the buying bells in bulk. It's not a very expensive process, but I think that you do with the turtle lights, that it may be an option both for information and for accessibility to have the town buy 100 of these bells and sell them at cost to people.
We can do that. We can buy bells and have, white and red lights for their bicycles or reflectors or whatever's appropriate, and have them available here at Town Hall for, cost rounded up to the nearest dollar.
I like that idea. I think these beautiful new sidewalks, the more we can encourage people to leave their cars at home, anything we can do about this horrific traffic issue, it's not going to solve it, but anything we can do to help mitigate it, I think is great.
I think it's important too that, and I've had this discussion with John, we can distribute as many of these as we want. And I know that some of the bike vendors do supply bells on all their bikes and lights. That doesn't mean that they can force them to use it. I think this is another good opportunity of using our PIO to get information out that it is required that you use your lights at night. I've talked to several people that didn't know, one, that they had the lights on the bike, and two, that they were required to use them. So this is, I think, an education opportunity for the town as well.
Just not to belabor the point, but just to add on to Councilor Aller's comment. The point of rental of a bicycle, so obviously the person renting it to a customer can emphasize it. They could, within the rental agreement, they could highlight it. They could attempt through their counsel or whatever to say that if you don't do this, we're not liable. I mean, they can definitely do things to draw awareness, at least the rental companies, and through a program to facilitate it, to for our local residents through having them available here at Town Hall. Hopefully we can encourage greater compliance.
Okay. I think we beat that one up enough. Thank you very much. The next item is B, which is the mooring field upland services discussion. And this, of course, is related to possibility of the town purchasing 2 units at the Harbor House development, or continuing to stay at Matanzas Inn. Is becoming less and less of a possibility here. But anyhow, so we'll open up this discussion and see where it takes us. To start.
I will.
Okay.
Because I provided a memo with a less than exhaustive list, but of issues of concern that we as staff and legal in particular believe that the council should consider in deciding to move forward. It is not an exhaustive list. It is based upon our preliminary analysis of the condominium documents that were provided to us by representatives of Harbor House. Certainly, to the extent that the council directs staff and legal to begin the process of officially entering into negotiations with the view of ultimately bringing forward for the council approval a purchase and sale agreement. There will obviously be much more detailed analysis of those documents and due diligence that would be required to address some of the issues identified in the memo and in a larger context. If that's stated, there's no contents of the issues identified in the memo are not intended to suggest that the council should or should not move one way, just simply information that to make you aware of based upon the conversations that we've had and certainly that staff continues to have with representatives of Harbor House. The context, obviously everyone knows that there's very limited locations properly zoned and configured or available for use for upland facilities to assist with the management and operation of the mooring field, and the decision that has been, or a recommendation of the advisory committee to move away from a contracted service provider and establish these services in-house. Obviously, the elephant in the room with regard to acquiring these units is the fact that they are under the form, a condominium ownership form. And as a result, the acquisition, build out and ultimate operation of those facilities are going to be subject to the town compliance with those condominium documents as they exist today and may exist in the future, may be amended in the future. And we would be remiss in not making the council aware that while the documents currently do allow this operation, things can change. And if the council moves forward and does direct us to staff acquire this particular piece of property or these 2 units, that's what you have, 2 votes on the board. And there are, we already know that that's a minority number.
The association, not on the board.
Correct. And that's not on the board, precisely. And I'm not saying, and it's not to suggest that that will happen, but unfortunately, you all may have heard me in the past, and I certainly will continue to say into the future, that my job sometimes is to tell you the parade of horribles of what can happen, so you all can have all the information available to you to make an informed decision. In the a component to that's very important for the town to consider is the issue of parking at Harbor House condominium. It's very constrained, it's limited, and under the existing condominium documents, preference is given to the residential units, and in fact, one of the amendments to the condominium documents that's taken place over the years since the initial set were recorded with the state is to actually take away guaranteed parking spots from the commercial units that are at the property. So there have been discussions with the condominium representatives, and they admit to that. They have suggested, well, you know, based on the existing regulations of the condominium documents, during times of the year that the units aren't the residential units aren't being occupied, there may be space. And they did at one point, they haven't at one point suggested, well, if the town does acquire the two units, if it combines the two units into one, which is provided for under the condominium documents, they would try and work and make sure that we have one available spot of the available parking, but the town would lose that second vote that it would have. It was the owner of two units versus one. So that's certainly something for the council to consider, the limitations that are built in with the parking and accessibility, not only for just staff, but visitors and vendors who may need to come to the facility from time to time to do business with the town at that location.
If I may, John, ask a question quick about the parking. Roger, maybe this is more directed at you. To deal with this parking issue, couldn't we earmark or hold off a couple of spots by the dinghy dock under the bridge somewhere that are designated just for that location, and potentially maybe look at if you have long-term rentals or long-term stayers at the mooring field, leasing a space to them if they're going to have a vehicle that they could lease a space for the year? I don't know if just thinking out loud.
We already have a parking program for the people in the mooring field. That already exists. And clearly, if the council decides to move forward with this concept, we could find a solution to the parking. I mean, I'm not, yeah, we may have to walk or it may be inconvenient, but I don't know that that in and of itself is a deal breaker. However, that being said, and again, here we are in a public meeting, not negotiating, potentially a private deal with somebody, but clearly, we feel that for our staff to be able to go up, we're going to be handling revenues and other things. We don't want a person walking down the street with all that, so we want ability for dropping off deliveries and picking up things to have at least one convenient parking spot. But council elects that based on the Anchorage Advisory Committee's recommendation that basically, there's really not many alternatives, and therefore we're going to live with the limitations on these properties. I wouldn't recommend you not to proceed purely on the basis of parking.
I agree with Councilman Allers. I've given this some thought before myself, and I don't see the parking issue, as you say, Roger, as being a deal breaker. In fact, I thought of the same things. I mean, we own the parking spots underneath the bridge, right? We can do whatever we want with those.
We lease the property from FDOT, and within that confines of that, yes.
Okay, so we have control over it through a lease. So anyhow, we can do things with it. That's not a deal breaker. Now, on the other side, somewhere down the line, the town does want to sell these properties, get out from under it, or something else becomes available. It'd certainly be more saleable parking. So we don't want to leave that just dangling out there. I mean, if it's available for something that we can negotiate and go after, why we should. There's no doubt about it. So, but anyhow, I'm sorry. So go ahead.
Mayor, that's actually another point that's raised in the memo, is that the resale, ultimately, if things change, the dynamics, whatever, the availability of additional land in another location, you know, having the ability to bundle these units with parking certainly makes them more attractive to a potential purchaser moving forward. There's another side to that issue, which is to the town should be aware of, at least in my opinion, is that you all are acquiring this for a unique, singular purpose. And the way it's going to be, that the schematics that are in the packet show it being finished out, it's pretty much for a particular use and only a particular use as the upland, and that may have an effect on the potential future, maybe never occurs, resale ability of the town to divest itself of that interest if it wants to move on, because it's built out a particular way. There's going to have to be, at least from what I understand, some significant upgrades or changes to the interior, particularly as it relates to the washroom facilities, or because of the voltage required to run the equipment for the washers and dryers that are going to be provided. So there are some built-in constraints to potentially resaleability down the road that may require significant post modifications, and if the town ever decides to try and convey those, and the issue of parking, as the mayor points out, may be an issue at that point. There is limited to no access or rights to use of the common elements. That was, again, a change to the condominium documents from when they were first recorded and provided to the state to as they currently are written. The explanation of the condominium association representatives is that, well, in turn, the amount of money that the commercial units have to pay in annual assessments has been reduced correspondingly to reflect that non-use. That's a perfectly good answer and explanation, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't say that it's kind of hard that the money goes into a one pot, so to speak, of the condominium association for the maintenance of the common elements. And I would venture to guess that in some form or fashion, the town would be subsidizing the maintenance of those common elements that it doesn't have the ability to use. But that may not be an issue based upon what the town intends on using the two commercial units for. Certainly one of the things that is specifically mentioned and prohibited is that the commercial units can't use the pool and the bathrooms that are associated with residential units. In any form of condominium, well, not in all forms of condominium, but in this particular instance, the condominium association, through its bylaws and condo documents, does have a requirement that any modification to any unit, including the commercial units, does require the approval of the condo board before they can be made. So not only would we have to verify that the improvements that we plan on making now or in the future comply with state and federal and local government regulation of our own, but also we would have to get the consent of the condominium association before we could make those improvements. We've received multiple correspondence over the weeks, including one that I just received as we were having this conversation, again restating from the condominium association. In preparation for your meeting today, this email is to confirm that the board hasn't any issue with the town purchasing an operation from these two listed units for use currently as mooring field or offices and operations, the intended use. This being said, any alterations required, as long as done in accordance with local and federal codes, will be fine. Any alterations of exterior building would have to go through the normal and appropriate channels. So this is just making us, again, aware that we will have to get their consent for most, if not all, of the improvements that the town would have to do to finish out these units for its intended use.
Oh, is that
And
from the,
in the future as well.
is that from the board directly or from their attorney or?
This is from a representative from Mr.
One board
Forsyth,
member.
from one of the,
One
I
board
believe
member?
it's one of the board members. Does it represent what the other board members would be?
we have not received any correspondence to date from any representative of the condominium association saying, you know, we've discussed this at the board level and I'm conveying this to you on behalf of the board.
Just going by
It may
examination?
have happened.
That may
but-
have happened, but it wasn't worded that way.
That way, that's correct.
You're just going on your examination of the
Right.
docs.
But if I may, Mr. Mayor, just real quick, John, I serve on our condo board, and I know condo board politics. So the person you're dealing with then, you say is on the condo board?
I believe they are, and I believe that there's goodwill from them to try to make this happen. I honestly believe that. I think the point that John wants you to be aware of is that these folks that we're dealing with today in good faith and seem very willing to work with us may not be on the board forever.
No,
And
no,
so,
and I-
but
and I-
yeah, I want to be clear that they want to work with us. They've been nothing but helpful, forthright in terms of sharing information with us and so on and so forth.
I appreciate that. I guess my question is then, reference to all these changes we're gonna need to make, we're gonna have to go before the board for approval, which is fine. But do you have a sense, based upon your contact with this particular board member, that you know what those changes are likely to be, and that they're comfortable with those changes? I mean, or have they seen what you're intending to do?
Well, I think, Counselor, the way we really looked at the issue is this, that if council had a concern with the concept of owning condominium units, needed to sort of fence with that issue if it existed. If it gets to a point where that in and of itself is not a deal breaker to the council, and assuming we can continue this, what I believe is a significant effort of the people we've talked to who are associated with the condo to try to make this happen, we can then sit down and say, okay, here's what we want to do, here's how we're going to do it. Do you have any concerns? You're willing to put this in the contract for purchase? You're willing to give us a letter that, you know, the condo board and the condominium association will support us doing? We would go to that next step.
We're not there yet on that.
Yeah, you know, at least I felt, and I don't want to speak for John, but I really felt that it was just really important to, you know, if any of you had strong reservations about the jumping into kind of, we
Gotcha.
get that out of the way. Because if that's a deal breaker, then why put all this other, all
Got
the
it,
balance
I
of this
got
energy
you.
into it?
Is the seller that we're dealing with, is that seller the original developer? Or is it a subsequent,
Doug Spear Smith is the person who's appeared in front of the Anchorage Advisory Committee.
he's the developer? so-
Yeah, I
so
believe
he
he
still
owns one unit and someone else owns the other unit. I believe it may even be the board that owns the other unit, I'm not sure.
And full disclosure, there have been copied or individuals, two other individuals that have been part of the conversations is a real estate broker that I don't know who they are representing in the transaction. And there have been copies of most of the most recent correspondence also apparently to the condo association's attorney.
Are these condos currently listed on the market?
I believe one of them might be.
So to be clear, the condo association is not really a party to the transaction. We have to get their agreement separate. We're negotiating with one party for the transaction, and then the condo board to get this agreement. But we can make an offer contingent on approval. of the agreement
Right,
with the
where-
condo
what
board.
we would do is, just we could try to wrap up all the approvals that we can reasonably anticipate we would need as part of the contract for purchase.
So could we, I mean, in an agreement, could we compel the condo board to not make a change, not decide 5 years down the road that they are not going to allow a use?
Yes, sir.
So,
I mean, we could, it would have to change, they would, in order to be, for that to be legally binding upon the homeowners association, they would have to, process an amendment to their regulations, that, would state that. And there would have to be, a fail-safe, such as that this portion of the bylaws cannot be modified in the future by a majority vote of the association without the consent of the town. Otherwise, that is the core issue that we have identified that the council needs to discuss and give us direction on, is you are otherwise bound by the condominium form of government.
So if the worst case scenario, and I know it's sometimes maybe self-defeating to talk about the worst case scenario, is that if we bought this and finished it, and 5 years down the road, a new board or fresh eyes of the association decide that they don't like having that there, they could change the usage, so saying we're not allowed to do what we bought it for?
No, we would continue to be able to move forward, and maintain that operation, because we've detrimentally relied upon the representations and the bylaws that, as they existed prior to the change. It just becomes difficult interpersonal issues.
it may not be a legal dispute, but it could be having a bad neighbor dispute.
And one other question, how many votes are there in a condo association? Because the difference between 2 and 1 is, are there 100, are there 200, or there?
I don't know the
It's
the
not
number of units, but
large.
we would, the town's 2 votes
Not going to carry the day.
are not going to carry the day, unless it's a narrow issue, that the town is especially concerned about. Other than that, you're going to be a minority owner.
Right. And a different
Foreseeable
use.
future.
And a different use than most of the votes, but it sounds like it tips the hand more towards saying trading a vote for a parking spot may be advantageous.
I don't think that's going to change the paradigm. I think, but as we discuss this, there's the sort of the 50,000-foot issue of buying a condominium, whether that's personally or us as a government entity, and having everyone's eyes wide open as to what that potentially entails. If that's not considered a deal breaker to you all, and then it's okay, now go get the best deal that you can, and then come back and tell us what that is. You can do that, but we just didn't want to put in meetings with people and all of that if at the end of the day party council would say, well, it's a condo, we don't want to own a condo. So that's why we approach the problem this way. As I said earlier, I think we have a strong desire, at least from the current people we've been talking to try to make this work. So I'm of the belief that we could reach a deal if council was comfortable with owning condos for this purpose.
I haven't said much yet. I've been trying to sit back and let everybody ask questions. I'm going to kind of back up here. I am in a difficult situation as the liaison to the Anchorage Advisory Committee because I would love to advance their goals. Kathy knows, however, that when this came up, I expressed grave reservations to the committee about the town becoming involved in a condo ownership, just as a general principle. Now, at that point, I had not yet seen the condo docs, but I said, of course, I'll look at those and maybe that will assuage some of my fears. I want to say, I got those condo docs. I examined them before I ever spoke to Mr. Herin. He and I have not. I did talk to him afterwards to ask him questions and say, are my fears legitimate? Here is what I fear. I examined them, independent of Mr. Herin. And I was very bothered by my review of the condo docs. I want to say I am in favor of us going in-house. This doesn't come from me saying I don't want to come in-house. I do want to come in-house, and I really wish that this would work. But I have grave reservations about entering into the condo situation. Give you some examples. The parking, to me, is a huge issue. It's not just the parking space, it's the fact that the commercial owners originally had a parking space and the board took them away. That gives you an example of how a board can operate. I can't imagine that the commercial owners that were in this building at the time were very happy that they lost their parking space. So to me, that's an example of how a board can operate to your detriment in a very significant way. As we all know, parking on this island is an extremely valuable commodity. Board also came in after the original documents and took away the commercial spaces use of the common elements. They had it at the beginning and they took it away from them. And they really didn't adequately address the equities involved in the cost. It still appears to me that we will be paying at least some portion of the maintenance and upkeep of the common areas that we do not get to use in this particular condo. I have been on a condo board as well, and the condo board that I was on had to, for example, do a huge special assessment because of the fact that our elevators needed to be replaced. Here again, this unit has elevators. We will not be gaining any advantage from the elevators, yet could be assessed tens of thousands of dollars toward elevator replacement in this building, which causes me great concern. It's already been mentioned that we rely on the goodwill of the board for making modifications. And even though we may get an initial approval as part of our deal, later on down the road, if we need to modify, and the board has changed, they may not be willing to give us permission. So I had grave reservations. I tried to set those aside and review the condo docs. After reviewing those condo docs, had further reservations, which I then called Mr. Herin and said, am I being realistic in these reservations? And I had not poisoned him in advance about this, if you will.
The
I
Vice
hate
Mayor's
to,
comments are correct. She certainly didn't poison, and the contents of the memo that we provided are just our observations, our initial observations, and comments that we believe, particularly because of municipal government, that this town council should be aware of before entering and directing staff to begin the process of entering into negotiations and ultimately potentially consummating this acquisition. To the Vice Mayor's point, that one of the issues about the unforeseen or unbudgeted expenses is identified in the memo. We have no idea when those may happen. Like in any, and we would be no different than any other unit owner. The point that I think that the Vice Mayor is making is that sometimes those special assessments and the corresponding improvements that are required as a result of collecting that special assessment may not benefit the town directly or indirectly. And so again, just that is one of the things that the town would subject itself to by entering into a transaction where the form of ownership is is subject to the condominium documents.
And that being said, John and Vice Mayor, in fairness, your point is well taken, that a properly run condo, and even by state law, reserves for these types of emergencies or contingencies or repairs or maintenance. So assuming this facility is properly reserved, they should be already setting money aside for elevators, roofs, common area improvements. So, and that's all been done by previous owners that at least up to this point, that reserve dynamic. So that should mitigate our concern a bit, but your point is still well taken. Yep.
In Ohio, I don't know about Florida. In Ohio, there was no state law mandating reserves by condos until recently.
There is
We do here.
There is here because of that issue. But the last issue that we've identified in the memo for your consideration is that we're acquiring 2 units. That's it. And while it may be sufficient for the town's needs currently, we don't know what those needs may be in the near or distant future. There was a discussion earlier today at the joint meeting with the advisory committees about expanding the size of the mooring field. If that comes to fruition, short-term or long-term additional expansion, it's going to put pressure on the facilities that would conceivably be built out in those 2 units. At some point, just like any facility, it's going to reach its max capacity or just aged obsolescence. And at that point, the town is going to have to potentially make another significant investment. That may be many, many years down the road, but there may not be the ability to expand within those existing facilities or make better use of those facilities because is simply maxed out and there isn't another commercial unit available in which to expand. So, but that's any facility. Again, to the point that some of you are making, we're just making you aware of these. We're not necessarily saying it's good or bad, but you do need to be aware of them. There's finite space in that location, and
Ask you something, is the water metered separately for those commercial units, or is everybody on 1 meter for the whole development?
The answer is I don't know, but I could probably find out pretty quickly.
Well, that would,
Give me, if you keep
That would
talking,
make a big difference,
I'll go get the answer right now.
for my own edification, I mean, that would be a big savings to in the town's favor if it was 1 meter for the whole, now you're having the association pick up some of that while we're picking up some, you know what I mean? It sort of balances itself, it can balance itself out depending on how this thing is set up. I mean,
Again, the board could come in and say, you guys are using lots of extra water because you have laundry facilities here. We're going to have a different assessment for your condo because of that. I don't think that we can count on that.
well, about that, but,
They seem to, based on the narrative that Vice Mayor Hosafros said, they seem to have this resident dominant bias in actions they've taken.
and that's not surprising, when they have the majority of the units, and there's only a few commercial units down there, so that,
The changes that I talked about were not voted on by all of the members. They were done by the board.
no, I don't know, John, that you can amend the declaration by a vote of the board without a vote of the membership.
there would be, but the point is that the town would certainly be minority.
Yeah, it
It
would
would
be
have to.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt,
No,
but-
as a normal rule of the policies and procedures under state laws, that changes have to be submitted to the unit,
The
unless
membership.
there's a section of the bylaws that delegates authority to the board for certain things.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
is advising that there's 1 meter for the building?
1 meter for the whole development.
Correct. Christy Corey for the record. They have actually 3 separate meters. So they have one for the actual, what we call the condos, and they have one for the boat dock and one for the store.
What was the last one, for the store?
That's what we have it listed as.
For all the commercial condos on the ground floor? Is that what you mean by that?
So they have 1 meter for what we call the condos,
Right,
number of units.
right.
And then we have one listed as a boat dock and one listed as a store. Whether they have a store in there or not, I don't know. That could have came over as, could be
Makes a
feeding.
difference whether, anyhow,
Mr.
I guess
Mayor?
that can be,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was going to be my point,
we
that,
don't have
you
to.
know, if council felt it was important that we had our own sub-meter for our operation, only paid our costs, we could do that. Or you're comfortable with the current arrangement, assuming we're on one of these other meters? We could work the deal in either direction, depending on the council's preference.
to cut to the chase here. So the question before us today is whether we think the possible purchase of these 2 commercial condominiums, whether the good for the town outweighs the possible problems that we could encounter in the purchase of the unit, which have been stated by the vice mayor and the attorney. That's really the question. So the question is whether we instruct staff to proceed in further exploring this or not.
I would just ask the vice mayor, just because she's spent a lot of time thinking and researching this, given the fact that we don't have a lot of alternatives, what would we do if we didn't decide to at least explore this further, in your mind?
Well, the argument is being made that there aren't other alternatives. I believe there's always other alternatives, personally. And there could be properties that weren't for sale before that will come up for sale. We haven't been looking at all of those possibilities. So I realize, and that's one of the reasons I really feel bad about taking the position I am. The committee worked very hard to get to this point. They're in favor of it unanimously. I will say that on their behalf. I just feel that the possible problems that we could have from this, that we would be leaving for future councils, are too great of a roll of the dice for us to take. And I say that with the greatest regret.
Well, I absolutely respect what you just said, but having listened to the mayor's, I think it wasn't a motion, but at least the question, I'm willing to at least let the staff go another step further to see if they can mitigate a lot of the legitimate concerns that you raised. And if they can't, they can't. Conceptually, I'm willing to let them try. I mean, process-wise.
I guess I just feel things that they cannot mitigate are so great that I hesitate for us to spend more time on it. We cannot mitigate the condo form of ownership. And that comes with certain negative risks that I feel are too great.
I think we know where these 2 members stand. How about you 2 guys? You have any opinion about?
Mr. Mayor,
Willingness.
Councilor Veach, excuse me for the interruption. I just want to make it clear that Councilor Hosafros referenced the fact that she looked through the condominium documents, but I want to just make sure that the public well knows you all were provided with those documents as well. Sorry for the interruption.
Well, I would say I'm a little bit on the fence because one thing about this alternative is that the price is actually better than we can, I think, build something from scratch, where if you had the land. But I appreciate the risk, and it reminds me of my observations is if you ask an accountant and an attorney the same question, they'll give you the opposite answer. That the numbers look good, but the risk is there. I'd like to move forward, but I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea that the board you can negotiate for a parking spot that they could take away. They could make another assessment. They could change the terms of the agreement after you've made it. That to me definitely is some concerns. And talking to the attorney, there's really no way to get around it.
Well, if the purchase and sale agreement provides that, the condominium association is, deeding or otherwise conveying to us a parking spot in conjunction with the acquisition of the, units, that's an enforceable agreement. They can't change the condominium documents later to remove that. What they can do is say, you have your one parking space, and no one else associated with your operation can use any of the other ones, even if they're available. That would be Parade of Horribles, worst case scenario. We have contractually acquired and paid for one of those parking spaces under your scenario, but the condominium association at a later date could modify the rules to say, you have your one, but you, under no circumstances, no way in heck will you ever be able to use, or anyone who comes visits your property can use more than just that one. And if we find that you have done that, we're going to tow the vehicle at your expense.
Aren't the parking spots assigned to units?
Sorry?
I would assume that the parking spots in a condo like this were assigned to units.
But they took them away. The condominium documents that originally were filed with the state granted the commercial units the right of use and designated a proportionate number of parking spaces to the commercial units. At a subsequent date and time, condominium association modified and filed
Right,
new
let me
rules
just-
saying
I'm just
we're
gonna-
taking them away.
I understand that. I'm just gonna, because
We're
my
not
question is actually different. My question is that if you go into their parking garage, are there a lot of unassigned spots, or is every residential unit assigned their
They're
spots
all
and that's where they
assigned.
park?
And stated conversely, there are no designated spots for the commercial units.
So that if someone went in there and the one spot that was taken that was assigned to a residential unit or a commercial unit, the rules are pretty much the same. They just can't go park anywhere. They're assigned.
That's correct. That's our understanding.
Counselor, I just want to say that, if council has legitimate concerns with the condo ownership, we can try to the greatest extent possible through our negotiations to mitigate the things we can foresee. But we can't necessarily mitigate everything. And so you say, well, okay, so what happens if down the road, there's some unlivable, unacceptable condition comes along? Well, we may theoretically have to sell. We don't know what the market would be. We don't know if our units would be marketable necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns with respect to that. You then looked at the alternative, which is say, well, what happens if we bought a commercial property and did this? Clearly, if we decided to get out of the upland mooring business, or, it would be a lot easier to sell that property. Doesn't necessarily mean we sell it as for profit, but clearly there'd be a lot less impediments. So, I think you all can sense that if we had a commercial property, freestanding versus this, we wouldn't necessarily even talking about this, but don't. As the Vice Mayor says, that doesn't mean that something couldn't potentially become available in the future, but we don't know if and when that'll happen either. So this is one of the, risky type decisions that you have to make that, we can't tell you a guaranteed outcome on. A lot of times we can say, if you do this, you're going to get this result. We can't tell you a guaranteed outcome here. So I want you to have a free and open discussion, fully understand the risk. If there's a decision for us to go ahead, we will do our best between John and myself and other staff members to do what we can to mitigate it, but we can't mitigate everything, as the Vice Mayor very clearly pointed out to you.
Yeah, I guess I'll chime in a little bit. For me, it's, does solve one problem, but it's potentially creating another. And I can sympathize with the vice mayor's position, working with a committee that works so hard on something and you don't necessarily agree with their outcome. I completely sympathize with that.
How so?
But, I had to follow her lead on this. If she feels that strongly about it, I have my reservations about it as well. I also agree that I don't think there's ever no other options. We just haven't looked enough, or maybe something hasn't come about yet. I don't know that there's enough that we could negotiate now, or that they'd be willing to give up now, that make it worth our while to potentially deal with any problems that come down the road.
I miss you, Bill, where you stood on this?
In my kind of experience, I've come up with some, negotiated some pretty onerous contracts, and then if done properly, they go in a drawer and you never look at them again. My feeling is that that's probably what would happen here, because this is not going to be a wide open facility. I doubt it will get a lot of complaints. Separate entrance from the condo. Those things are built, so there shouldn't be a lot of issue with noise, and the town's under control. So I really don't see a lot of conflicts happening down the future. And it's a good fit, it's a good location, and it's a good price. So I think I lean towards trying to go forward and develop it more, and with our eyes open for any pitfalls.
That's a yes, yes, no, no. Comes down to me. I'll tell you, I'm intimately aware of the condominium situation. I've owned condominiums, I've run condominium associations, developed condominiums. I know Chapter 718 in and out, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'll qualify that right now. But and I know the good, the bad, and the ugly of condominium associations. There's not too much of it I haven't seen. Jim, you've seen plenty yourself, and you're going to see more. But anyhow, with all that being said, I understand exactly the reservations that the vice mayor has. But, I also, I'm not sure just yet where the weight falls down between the public benefit of these units and the potential risk from the condominium association. And as I say, I know it can happen with these associations. It doesn't. A lot of times, it just takes one. And with all that being said, I'm willing to take another look at it, just to take a look at it and to see where we are and further explore it a little bit. If we purchase them at the right price, at a reasonable price, I don't see how we can really lose money on them, assuming that the market holds up, which there are no assumptions. But if we make a good deal on those, and we are a good neighbor, and as you say, Bill, the contract can go in a drawer, but I have a feeling this is not one. I have a feeling this is one that will be pulled out once in a while. But I am willing to look at it a little further. And if we get to the point where some of these objections that are raised become overbearing, then I'll certainly also be willing to back off. So, but I would say, Roger, that it's worth exploring further, and who knows, maybe I mean, are those units, that the residential units there, do they have those parking spots deeded to them in their purchase agreements? The developer?
I can't answer that question, but we certainly can find that out.
Well, that would make a difference. I mean, if they were entitled to have one it to them and somehow unilaterally decided, well, we're not going to do that or something, you know, that would be something to me to look into because, you know, if there were assigned parking spots and somehow they managed to take a few back from from those commercial people, you know, there might be something missed there, you know. So, but anyhow, that would be my my way I feel about it is to look at it a little further and see if there's a way to overrule some of these objections. Then, again, be able to weigh benefit versus the potential down liability of it. There's your direction.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, we'll open up discussions with them and see what evolves from that. To the extent you have any concerns, today, tonight, tomorrow, next week, please share them with us so we can attempt to get them addressed as best we can. And, you know, this could be on a trail to nowhere, but if you want us to put forward the effort, we'll start the process.
I would comment too, Roger. I think it's still a good idea to keep looking, to keep eyes and ears
Yes,
open.
indeed.
Well, to that extent, you know, one of the things I wanted to be was forthright with the committee. The committee met yesterday. I informed the committee chair that there'd be a significant conversation about this topic, and that it could very well be that Arbor House alternative would be put on the shelf today. That should be continuing to pursue alternative locations. And she quickly told me that, well, they felt like they've done an exhaustive search. But in any event, we will, I'm sure they will think, you know, we'll all do the best we can with the facts as they are. One thing I could tell you, we will not gloss over any of the facts or any of the shortcomings or any of the unresolved impediments, you know, as we continue to talk to them.
I would echo that, the comments of the manager. We obviously, this is going to be a significant investment for the town, and we will bring as much information as we can acquire to your attention so you all can make an appropriate and informed decision. Vice Mayor has done a lot of work as the liaison, and as in her capacity as the Vice Mayor, she, you know, reached out to me with her concerns, and I, you know, as staff, we're available to try and answer as many questions as possible. But some of the questions or the issues that have been raised will require us to get some further clarification from the unit owners and the association representatives, and ultimately, some form or fashion, position by the board itself on behalf of the association to, I think, give all the appropriate comfort level to continue the process as we move forward.
I'll tell you, the town has come a long way in 25 years. 25 years ago, we talked about items like this and projects, and we were prohibited by charter from even considering it and from entering into any long-term debt because the original incorporators did not want to saddle the new town with any debt whatsoever. I realize this didn't necessarily mean taking on debt here, but it just goes to show how far we've come in a relatively short amount of time. But, anyhow, okay, we'll put that one to bed for a while, and we'll go to the next item, C, structures at beach accesses.
Quick break there, Mayor.
Take a break? Okay, 10-minute break? Sorry about that. sanctuary, I guess you'd say. I commented, it came in under, it was,
Status about, asking me about it, so.
okay, we'll come back to order. 12:17. Before I forget, the vice mayor just asked me to update the council on what has been happening with the vaccine conversations with the county commissioners and so forth. I have been speaking periodically with the Commissioner Ruane, the chairman, who's kind of the lead person with the vaccines, and it has been my goal with him to get some vaccine down here on the beach, and not only Fort Myers Beach, but the islands per se, you know, the beach, Sanibel, Hickory. And he has reassured me that that he is working towards that. But, like everything else, it hasn't been coming together just yet. So that is still the plan. It hasn't happened yet. They are vaccinating more people now. Now the challenge is to keep the supply up, the dosage is up. Not only to keep it up, but to keep it up, use it right away so it can be increased. I think I told you this before. His goal was to eventually get 20,000 doses per week to disperse. If they get on that kind of pace. So he said that once they do start getting their supply up, that they're going to try to start breaking pieces off here and down here. And I had to laugh the other day. I tried the Publix thing online for my dad. I started around 5 in the morning, and I was ready to go at 6. And of course, you know, I think they said 250,000 requests came in for. I think our countywide we were allocated. I don't know what it was, 1,500 doses or something like that. We really can't rely on these on what's going on now. We have to get more and more of these the supply. Well, that's where we are, and of course that wouldn't have affected us here on the beach, the Publix thing, because we don't have a pharmacy at Publix. So anyhow, we'll wait and see, and rest assured that I'm in constant communication with them about this, and as soon as I hear good news to report back, it certainly will. Okay, the next item is the structures at beach accesses. Someone want to start this off?
Mr. Mayor, I will. We believe that, that based on everything we have seen and the regulations that are applicable, that there's no impediment for the council and the town to have a portable, self-contained bathroom, as was the case between 2011 and 2015 at Palm Avenue. Now, to the extent that council or community wants us to look at other locations, we would have to look at that location individually, because the way the rights of way and easements were established might prohibit it at that location. But moreover, I really can't imagine that this council, who's very interested in what the community has to say, would force one in a beach access where the immediate neighbors objected. So, to the extent that we have none, we're going with one. the one that had been there from 2011, 2015. Unless there's a change of mind of the members of the council, it's our intention to proceed with the TDC to see if we can secure the funding for that. To the extent that people are concerned about proliferation or their neighborhood, I don't foresee or anticipate that. And if I did, I would share my hesitancy in setting a precedent, but I do not see that happening.
Okay. Comments?
Now, I'm looking under under your, the green sheet here, and you have condition 1 that has to be on site fewer than 180 consecutive days with Palm Avenue. Is that moved?
Well, the answer is that it was moved, and frankly, in moving it is what really creates the wear and tear on it more so than when it's sitting idle. But every time we have a hurricane warning or watch, it's moved. It's moved periodically for just general maintenance, and really that moving of it is what creates the wear and tear on it. It's like any RV or boat trailer or whatever, you know, constantly maintain the springs, the wheels, the hubs, and all that stuff.
Did you have it on some kind of schedule to conform to this 180 days that barring maintenance or storm, that you would move it just because you had to comply with the rules?
Well, I don't know what was done in the past because I wasn't here in the past, but I would, of course, we would adhere to the rules prospectively.
And I also know, like with the last time when Etta came, that it fooled a lot of people because when it went offshore, a lot of people battened down and then put everything back, and then it came onshore, and I noticed that there's quite a few Moby mats and things that got pulled up by that storm.
Right. Well, you know, I think when we have a hurricane, right, there's a hierarchy of things that we try to deal with. And while we try to, for example, remove the Moby mats, as you alluded to, in terms of priorities, in terms of a storm, that would be a lesser priority than moving this, or when we had our servers in the building and securing this building and securing our other properties. So we go through a hierarchy of items, and yeah, if we have one of these storms that, you know, everyone says is not coming here, and then at the last second does come here, we may run out of time and not get to everything, but we make sure that we do it in a hierarchical order of things based on the risk and, you know, what happens if it does get blown away. That's a Moby mat, we can get another one, you know. It's not our intention to do that, but it happens from time to time.
What was the cost for the Palm Beach access bathroom? What's the cost to replace it?
I want to say it's $130,000, but I'm going from memory.
Well, you know, I think my opinion is fairly well known. I think that, I mean, I did see one on Palm Avenue, and by probably, I hope it was near the end of his life, but there were valves that weren't shutting. There was water that was constantly running off of the shower. And I don't think any of these are particularly pleasant to look at. I don't think they're a welcome ambassador when you're walking down to your beach vacation to go buy one of these. I think there's better alternatives. I think that cooperating with businesses in a way that brings them business and then allows the public to use your bathroom is a better way to provide this service and to benefit businesses and not provide this eyesore. I do agree that the getting neighbors' approval before putting something in would be beneficial. I know my experience living next door to a beach access is that the rules are not really clear. Like right now, I think the way the rules are with the beach access parking is that parking lot doesn't close, it becomes free at night. There's no overnight parking, but after I think 9 o'clock now, they don't have to pay for parking. There's no rules. And it seems like anything that's put in the beach access seems to create benefit, but also a problem. Because I know they put these park benches in the beach access, and just a bench alone can be an attraction for people who are littering and stuff. I've certainly hauled a lot of whiskey bottles out of my, my COs on occasion and things. So anything you put in really starts changing these beach accesses to bee parks that then can have potential problems like you see at Newton Park that the neighbors are complaining about. So I think there are better alternatives. I think that we can do without these and still provide the service. And we do still have, I think, 11 or 12 public bathrooms up and down the beach with no indication to our visitors where they are.
Yes, I'd like to chime in at this point because my understanding of why this was put on the agenda was to reassure our residents we weren't going to put one anywhere else. It was not to relitigate the issue of this particular one, which was already voted on. And I am willing to reassure in whatever form our residents that we're not going to put in others. But the discussion today is not about Palm Avenue. My understanding is we voted on that.
Hey, I want a correction because when we were talking about that, my understanding of that discussion is we voted on applying for the TDC funding with the understanding that we'd have to approve installation.
Exactly.
Separate vote.
Exactly, but today's discussion, I agreed to put this on today's discussion because my understanding was the purpose of today's discussion was to reassure the residents that we're not going to put them other places.
Okay.
And I want to reassert that because I've been the person who's been coming forward for the Palm Avenue bathrooms. And I wanted to reassert to everyone that that's my position in whatever way the council wants to reassert that. But the purpose today was not to rediscuss Palm Avenue, in my view.
So then, and your contention was that Palm Avenue did not have any neighbors that disagreed with the installation.
Correct.
So then stating or codifying that they won't be put in without the neighbor's consent would not affect Palm Avenue.
Exactly.
I think that could be accomplished by resolution of the town council whereby permission is granted to Palm Avenue and prohibited anywhere else on the island.
Well, prohibited unless the neighbors agree. The idea is that the neighbors could object and would not be put in wherever neighbors objected.
And with the
You could take
understanding,
that discussion right out of it by prohibiting it.
We had a rough draft of where we were going, and I was trying to stick with that.
and you're right, but for simplicity's standpoint, that we don't really have to make an exclusion for Palm Avenue because the understanding is that the neighbors didn't complain about Palm Avenue in the first place. It's not a residential neighborhood.
Correct.
Well, the immediately adjacent neighbors aren't residential. So then if there's consensus, the suggestion would certainly be, just simply be to codify that we won't put bathrooms and beach accesses or any structures and beach accesses without the approval of the neighbors.
I'm not going to go to any structures. For example, if you're considering a bench a structure,
Oh,
in fact, that's one thing I was going to say, hey, as a trade-off, you don't want bathrooms down there? I'd like to see some benches. I walked on the beach recently and twisted my ankle, managed to hobble to a beach access, and there was no place for me to sit down. I think minimally having a bench at a beach access is something that we should be looking at doing. So I would object to saying of any structure. I'm willing to say, no, we won't put in bathrooms where the
we could
neighbors
certainly
object.
define a structure. And my understanding in conversations I've had with Turtle Time is that there's really no such thing as a turtle-friendly bench.
And the bench I'm talking about doing is back on this side of the dune line where, I mean, parking cars, which obviously turtles can't get through those either. So I'm talking about a bench back in the area where you're past the turtle line.
A lot more hobbling to do.
I hobbled a very long way.
Well, there's a lot of places on the beach where there is no beach access for a long ways. So, depends on where you were. The definition of a structure, that's certainly something we can decide on.
I think it's really the bathroom issue today, right? Is that that's really what we're looking at here? Is that, am I wrong or am I,
Well, my recollection of what happened was that there was discussion about moving forward at this location because of its past history of providing public restroom there.
Right.
And You know, I heard from some members of council that there was a sort of a underlying or whisper concern that this would possibly result in other locations being considered. And what I took back from the council's comments was, let's put it on agenda, let's reassure everybody that we're not contemplating any other locations for a variety of reasons. And at this point, we're singularly focused on Palm Avenue. That was the purpose of this discussion as I understood it.
Maybe, John, you could come up with some document to memorialize that or something like that, and,
Well, you know, certainly the manager's recollection is what I have, and that the singular focus that providing you information and having this discussion is really only related to Palm Avenue moving forward with the request from the TDC for funding potentially to put that facility at that location based upon all the circumstances that are unique to the Palm Avenue situation. That's all we've been focused on. If the council at a future meeting directs staff to prepare a resolution, be more than willing to prepare one that says that, you know, the current council is opposed to, you know, bathroom installations in other beach access locations, other than except for this one at Palm Avenue.
I think that's the reassurance that the people on the beach are looking for, particularly the ones that live on accesses.
Yeah, I do think, though, that, you know, the kind of agreement that with neighbors' consent, because, you know, maybe you want to have make sure you have a conversation with the Palm Avenue neighbors before, just saying that, because that kind of covers the basis. There may be another Palm Avenue somewhere on the island, somewhere closer to downtown, where the neighbors want a bathroom.
Well, I think that to the vice mayor's point, then we deal with that if and when that comes up. Right now, the singular focus is on Palm Avenue, where all the information that's been provided to me and the discussions here before the council is that there is no objection by the neighbors to this location. And in fact, that they're part of the discussion and the rationalization, if you want to characterize it in that way, is that there was such a facility there before. And we are just replacing what was there before.
Part of the conversation was come up with a way to make sure that any kind of situation like the Palm Avenue bathroom comes up again, that it can be resolved in a way that's more universal for the island, instead of every time there's an issue, have it come back before council.
Well, with all respect, I think that is the function of the council, is to deal with these potentially on a case-by-case basis, and not preclude yourself or future councils from having the ability to do so.
But let's just be clear. Items such as this, we have to ask council's opinion, can we apply for the grant? And the grantor has to allocate the money. Then we have to bring back an item, again, at a public meeting, to accept the grant. Then we have to bring back an item to acquire the widget. So at a minimum, notwithstanding M&P discussions, there's 3 public meetings that would be necessitated for us to do Palm Avenue or anything similar down the road. So there's not very much that happens here that everyone doesn't know about pretty darn quick on this island. And you all know better than I, if there's something that's bothering people, you're going to get a flurry of emails, texts, and phone calls. As soon as there's any wind of something happening that people are uncomfortable with. So, as it pertains to, whether everyone's going to go to sleep tonight and there's going to be 40 bathrooms show up tomorrow, be sure that's not going to occur.
Let's just let me clarify a couple of things here, Roger, because one is, I don't necessarily believe that everyone that watches the council meetings and knows what goes on. It seems like the people around Bayfront Park didn't have any idea that, committees are meeting for a year, about plans at Bayfront Park. And the other thing is, I know when different councils have different ideas, because there was a time when there was a plan to put a large number of bathrooms in residential areas. And some of the neighbors didn't know until they were out surveying to actually put them in. They were marking, this is before your time, Roger, but they were actually putting, marking where the utilities were in preparation. I think that the effort here can be to at least set some guidelines about when this is allowed and when it's not.
I personally completely support the idea that anything we can do to reassure the public that, that they may have concern, that their concern is being understood and addressed is a good thing.
And I would recommend, and see if there's any consensus among the council, to have the town draw up some kind of resolution that we can discuss that would alleviate those concerns.
Not with me, but you're telling to proceed with the, using the TDC money for the
We've already voted.
Already done that.
Oh, that's been done, okay.
And that'll be sometime, I assume, before it comes back, whether money's available or not. So there's time. We have quite a window
Okay,
to
well,
deal with this.
I'm fine with that.
I agree with the vice mayor. I think that's why we were here today, is to try to find some procedural mechanism to help reassure folks that there won't be additional restrooms placed in beach access, particularly if there's opposition from the neighbors. And so I would support some kind of an effort to do. I don't know how you do that, particularly given the fact that we can't bind future councils, but I think
Well, we
whatever
can
we
do
can do to indicate that
A
our,
resolution.
Well, and that's the suggestion is we will, we hear the concerns, we hear the consensus and on our end as staff, we'll prepare a resolution for council's consideration at an upcoming meeting to that effect.
Sounds reasonable to me. Anybody else? Okay, all right. Here's your direction. Okay. Next item, before we get on to agenda management, is this your Hollywick here, the arch?
sir.
Go right ahead. Why don't you start us off on this?
try to be brief because I know we're at the end of a marathon week here. Before you, the town manager was kind enough to disseminate 5, not really photos, but they're attempted photo-like designs of potential locations for not the arches, but an arch. And Commissioner Sandelli, the Lee County Commissioner, whose district is our area, has taken on this challenge to try to solve this Gordian knot, if you will, of the appropriate, not only location, but design of where to put these arches. And in a moment of weakness, I accepted his challenge to try to work with him on this. And we've had some great conversations to the commissioner's credit. He's been gracious, he's been listening, he's been working with his team to try to solve problems. We've been working with the Restore the Arches group. Council's been very open-minded to this effort, and I appreciate that. So what they've come up with, the last time I spoke with, not the last time I spoke with, but a couple weeks ago, I spoke with the Commissioner Sandelli, and he said, let me send this to our parks folks, let them go out, explore the locations, let them come up with a series of options, and let me have them draw it up, because what I think the ultimate goal would be for the county then would, assuming the council were comfortable with a couple of options. I'd like to give the county a couple of options, because it's the ultimate decision is with the county. This is a great, I think, courtesy that they're doing to make sure that, and I think they want to make sure that they incorporate our input into this. So I think what they want to do is then take control of the design and building of the arch for structural and legal and liability issues. And then at that point, they will then do a cost estimate and let the Restore the Arch know what the cost estimate is, and then the Restore the Arches folks would then be charged with raising the money from the private sector, and then proceeding accordingly. So our task at hand is to just, and what I hope to do today is just, I always want to make sure, full disclosure, that you have everything that I have, is that of these 5 options that the county, Lee County Parks folks have come up with, really are the two of these 5 are the 2 that have been really thoroughly vetted in the community. They've been in most of our news publications. The pictures have been there. People have had a chance to respond accordingly. The council's been fully briefed on those. I mean, fully, as much as we can be briefed on these. And the 2 that reflect and I like to have one at Bowditch and one at Lynn Hall, again, giving Lee County commissioners some flexibility, given their disposition on this issue. The 2 that reflect what we've already had conversations about have been publicly vetted, and also the Restore the Arches group have been comfortable with, are location D for Bowditch Park. And then if you see, and then there's one that says it's Archway commemoration at Bowditch, location D, and then Archway commemoration at Lynn Hall, location A. And those are the ones that are closest to the northernmost beach access point within the park. They're not on the beach, they're on the other side of the vegetation. And it's where the county has determined structurally and for safety reasons that they're most comfortable placing the arch. We don't have the specifics of the arch yet. It's, again, just that photograph that, of a potential design, which is a single arch, which folks could pass through as they go through the park on the way to the beach. It's not obtrusive. It's not a full replication of the arches. And again, the Lee County would be in charge of this whole effort. It's their park, but they want to be very sensitive to the council's thoughts and concerns and direction in terms of location. And so I guess my request today is to make sure my colleagues are comfortable with these 2 locations, and then what I would then ask Roger to do is formally put it on the agenda for our next meeting, so then the public could be publicly noticed. They could see these documents and locations in our packets. Again, the public's already has a pretty good idea of where these are and what they would potentially look like, but this would then procedurally just make sure that there's enough opportunity for public input and public to view these locations. And before we finally vote, and then as I was just talking with Roger and the town attorney about the best way to convey this to the county commissioners would likely be via letter from the 5 of us, thanking them for their involvement in this, and just and saying that these were the 2 locations that we think would work best for the island. You know, obviously the ultimate decision is with the county, but we're thankful that you're working with us to try to solve this problem, and something to that effect. So that's where we are today, and I just wanted to posit this to my colleagues today and see if everybody's comfortable with that, and then we would move forward again at the next formal town meeting, and then codify that through some formal discussion, or I don't even know if we have a vote or whatever the town attorney advises, but then they would convey our thoughts to the county commissioners via letter.
So if I'm getting this right, our role at this point and in the future would be one of endorsement only.
Yes, sir.
We're just going to endorse one of these choices,
With these choices.
or
Yes,
two
sir.
of these choices, and these 2 in particular, and send that along to the county commission, who will deal with the arch folks as far as the fundraising and payment goes, and location.
That's correct.
So, I mean, we have to have bring that forward again well, Jim, you want to involve the public in it.
Yeah, that's the only reason why. I want to make sure the public has a complete opportunity to see what's going on, take a look at these locations once again, and just give them the appropriate notice that they would need to, before we send it on to the county.
Okay.
I'm in favor of putting it on a future agenda, and in fact, I would endorse all 6 of the locations in case they have trouble with the first 2.
Very good.
Sounds like somebody who wants to wash their hands of this matter. But anyhow, that's great. Everybody else okay with that?
I agree too. I kind of like the 2 locations just to avoid too much confusion.
Yeah, me too.
Anything we can do to narrow it down. So Roger, if you'd be so kind, just at our next formal town meeting, to put these 2 locations on the agenda, then that way they could be part of and Amy can put that in the packet so people can, that's what we're going to be formally considering at the next town meeting.
Jim, I want to thank you for taking on this role and getting us to this point. I know you jumped in and to your initial suggestion there at Lynn Hall Park, got the county involved, and in their wisdom, they'll be able to figure this out.
Well, and thank you for that, and I have to just once again say, Commissioner Sandelli, I mean, it's a new era. He's a delight to work with and very open to our input, and I think, I can't say enough about what a problem solver he is, and he seems very open to the concerns of the island, so I have to thank him once again for his kind cooperation.
I had a chance to speak with Commissioner Sandelli at Mayor Coviello's funeral the other day, and after he said, "Hi, Ray," first thing he brought up was the arches. So he's on board about that, and as you say, he's very amenable to our needs down here. And then I told him, I mentioned to him, and I might as well put it out here now, I've been approached via email from Barbie with the Lions Club. Her grandfather was Pete McCagg, who died, and she wants to get a bench for him. He was the founder of the Shrimp Festival. She wants to honor her grandfather and the Lions Club with a bench of some sort, commemorating his efforts and the efforts of the Lions Club over the years for the Shrimp Festival, and asked me where I thought would be a good place for it. And of course, she said, Times Square or Lynn Hall Park, and I said, well, we're kind of on a roll with Lynn Hall Park here. I said, that might be a good place to put it, and that's where most of the activity was. Once the parade was over with, everybody poured into Lynn Hall Park. So that'll be coming forward, and she wanted our help in getting that to either to us for Times Square or the county for Lynn Hall Park. And I assured her that either way, probably wouldn't be too much difficulty in securing.
I can tell you, having
Location.
organized a group that raised funds for Memorial Bench, that Chelsea has a program in place. It's great to work with.
Good. Then I will.
You should see Chelsea. Chelsea has the list of available locations and the prices, and
Excellent. Excellent.
it worked very well. There's a program in place.
Then I will pass that on. Thank you. Okay, that's that. Before we get on with the agenda management as our final item, I had the staff copy this to my fellow members here. This is a green sheet from Bonita Springs City Council. Their councilwoman from District 1, which includes the Lover's Key area and Hickory Island and so forth, and the new bridge over Big Carlos Pass. Her name is Amy Quaremba. She has been very active in this bridge discussion since it was first laid out by the county, and she is not sure that, as a matter of fact, she is certainly not sure that the 60-foot bridge is the right one to build down there. And there is all sorts of justification, their justification included in this information. And she called me one day, knowing that I had some personal feelings about the bridge myself, and I guess she was looking to see if there was any support. So I did tell her, and which she was already aware of, that the prior council here on Fort Myers Beach had unanimously endorsed the other options for the bridge at Big Carlos Pass, which was the repair existing bridge or build the 20-foot, 24-foot, whatever it is, Bascule Bridge as the replacement to all the new bells, whistles, and so forth. And that's the one that I had endorsed. Before I was on the town council, I appeared at the commission meeting where they voted on this 60-foot bridge and voiced my objection to that for several reasons, and assured them that there would be more discussion about it. So I'm putting this out there to my council members. I hope you can read this, or if you haven't read it yet, that you will read it, and see if you if you have any feelings one way or the other about whether you agree with the path that's been chosen by the county on the size of this new bridge. I will tell you just flat out, I just did tell you that I'm opposed to the height bridge for lots of different reasons, and least of which is all of the objections of the neighbors on both sides of the bridge naturally objecting to the view, much like people would object to a bathroom in a right-of-way next to their house. So, anyhow, I'm putting that out there to my members. I realize this is coming up again on the 28th at the Bay Oaks. There'll be a presentation. You know, there's not going to be any action, obviously, there by any commissioners, but if there were an appetite on our council to object to this this major bridge going up, and joining with the unanimous City Council of Bonita Springs, that may bring a little more weight to the discussion. May, mind you, may bring a little more weight to the discussion with Lee County. So, just throw that out there. If anybody wishes to comment, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, we'll bring this up again. Oh, you're unmasking.
My understanding, I understand the concerns, certainly, but my understanding is the ship has kind of sailed, that they've went way down the road on this and made their decision.
No, I was under the impression that there was one final vote to be taken. Could be wrong on that, but I think there is still, well, until they start moving barges out there and moving equipment around, I think there's still a possibility of some discussion. So that would be my opinion.
The question, Mr. Mayor, was the letter to, or by the Bonita Springs Council, is that in the packet? That I missed that? Copy of that letter?
From our town council?
Their entire town council. She sends a letter. I didn't see the letter from the town council. Or, I'm not saying there's not one, I just didn't see it in the packet. Did Bonita Springs Town Council recently send a letter?
Yes, it's from the mayor, Peter Simmons. It's
Right after the one you're referring to.
dated December 7th. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. It would be page 5 of this packet. If it didn't make it into yours, I'll be happy to copy it for you. Mayor Peter Simmons, 2-page letter.
I'm sorry, I don't think I got it, so I apologize.
My packet. Thank you. You can have that. I have another one.
Oh, the one from 2018. I'm
Yes,
sorry. Oh, I
yes.
thought there was a recent effort. I'm sorry.
Well, the recent effort is a continuation of this. So to answer, I think, well, your question is there something from the current council?
Yes.
And I think there is, Roger. Did you speak with the councilwoman too, or?
I think they are contemplating also sending a letter. They're waiting to see whether their letter would be worded, the town of Fort Myers Beach and the
Joint.
and both object to this, or so they're sort of kind of waiting to see how that wording, or it's just that we, Bonita Springs, object. But
Okay, I
I
just
think
was
that's,
curious.
Yeah, I
that's
think
my understanding.
that's
They're waiting for understanding of this council's position on the matter so that they can embed that in their letter as well.
Okay, thank you.
Do they want to get this letter to them before the presentation
Well,
next week?
I think that would be ideal. I guess we could come in afterwards, but if there seemed to be some consensus, and I'm not going to put you on the spot right here, right now, and try to nail you down, but you're more than welcome to volunteer the information if you like, if you have any inkling whatsoever as to which bridge you would prefer down there. Willing to listen to that now, but certainly wouldn't insist on a response right now. But if you were able to come up with something beforehand, And wanted to call that into the manager. Maybe we could assemble a letter, or at least put our thoughts down and get that to Councilwoman Karemba and prepare some joint letter, which I'm sure you'd all want to see before it went out as well. But it would take a little bit of coordination to do it before then, but, stranger things have happened.
Do you think, because I think the other things, I don't know if it's really, if it's this meeting where we have to ask for things like the reef, the rubble going to a reef, or the potential for an access and a fishing pier.
Well,
That may be later, if that,
no, we could ask then. Those requests have been made already as far as the reef business. I mean, they're well aware of that, and the fishing pier itself. Now, the access to the fishing pier, that's something that I first heard today. But maybe that's been contemplated. I don't know. That's the first I've heard of it. But, I presume there's going to be a commissioner there. Maybe our district commissioner, Sandelli, will be there because he represents both us and Benita. And if he were there, we'd be able to voice our concerns to he. Short of that, I don't think there's going to be any real action taken that day. But a joint letter, it doesn't have to be right to them that day. It can go to the commission afterwards. And I would think that coming from two city councils, one city, one town council, would at a minimum would have to be looked at and considered. Whether I have my own opinions as to what would happen, but I think out of for me, out of respect to our sister city, I would be inclined to assist in this matter, because I already feel that. I'm on the record as feeling that way already. It's an easy decision for me.
just for the sense of kind of reviewing this too, my understanding is that what the three proposals were to rehabilitate the existing bridge, build a new drawbridge, or build a 60-foot bridge, right?
Well, there were actually four. There was five. It was really, four. Well, do nothing is not an option. They would rehabilitate the existing bridge, keep it going, which frankly they probably could for another 50 years. But then the other choice was a 20 or 24-foot bascule bridge, the drawbridge. Another one would be a 40-foot or approximately bascule drawbridge, or the 60-foot span, fixed span. That would be the 60-footer is the only fixed span. Of course, their reasoning is that it's a cost saver and this and that and everything else. And Councilwoman Karemba, who I spoke with on the phone, is a very intelligent lady. I don't know what her background is, but she's very intelligent. She challenges those present value estimates in this information that I provided you. You may want to take a look at that, and feel free to call her if you like. Happy to speak with any or all of us. And the new mayor. Okay. Hearing no further discussion, we'll go on to the agenda management. Wants to start this off? Anybody have any?
Well, I can jump in if no
Okay.
one else has their notes together yet.
Go right ahead.
I noticed from agenda management that one of the things I asked for recently was added to, and that's the mechanical noise at the bottom. But at the same time, I also asked for us to look at revising the footprint. And that one didn't get the agenda management, and I asked for the two at the same time. So, and I believe I had support from the council that be added. Number two, I brought up previously that I would like to support the city of Sanibel and their state legislative priorities. had some questions about that, and I said, sure, take some time to look at what they had written out, and I didn't know if anybody wanted to move forward with supporting them on their state legislative priorities were, as to my memory, exclusively about the water issue. It wouldn't be that we would be joining them on asking for funding for their town or anything of that nature. It all had to do with water.
I would be in favor of supporting that.
I would too. I have no issues with it. I have to confess, Madam Vice Mayor, I went back to look for that document, and I couldn't find it at home, so I think I may have discarded it by mistake, so I apologize. But at the time when I read it, it seemed very impressive, so.
Okay?
I have no objection.
So a letter from the town signed by the mayor that goes to, I guess, the state and the city of Sanibel, so that Sanibel knows that we have joined them.
We would copy Sanibel and send it to the state.
Okay. And last on my list, this is a brand-new thing that I've been thinking about for a while and had finally decided to bring up. I have knowledge of at least 2, and I'm guessing there are probably more, private beach accesses to the south end of our island that are owned by homeowners associations. My observation of those over the past 15 years is that they are slowly being encroached upon by their neighborhood condos, and that when I have checked with the homeowners that live in the area, their homeowners associations are no longer active, no longer taking care of their beach accesses. There aren't any signs that designate that they're there. I've had to go out on one instance, the one that's closest to my house, and let the beach vendors know that they're putting chairs across the beach access. So I guess what I'm looking for is, does the council have any willingness to put the word out to the community that if your homeowners association has a beach access and you don't want to take care of it anymore, would you consider turning it over to the town? That way, A, we could protect it against encroachment, which you are no longer doing. B, we could make sure it's maintained. C, we could get TDC funds for it. D, it would help us to get beach renourishments funds because we would have it. I'm running out of letters, but it's also in our comprehensive plan that we wanted to add beach accesses to the southern end of our island where they are.
You open it up to the public.
Yes. So there are multiple reasons that I would love to reach out to the homeowners associations. Well, they're not even existing anymore, is my understanding. Reach out to these neighborhoods, have them and say, maybe you guys could get together for a final meeting of some kind and decide to turn these over to us. I don't know if this is an overwhelmingly difficult idea, or...
I think it's a great idea, and I'm curious, are these disappearing associations having to pay property taxes on that beach access, or how does it work from a practical standpoint?
Well, I don't know, because like the rights of way, they could all be worded differently in their underlying documents. But here's the thing, and Madam Vice Mayor, I don't know if there's 3, 5, what that number is, but if we can be successful with one, that's one more that we have, and maybe we'll be 2, or maybe it'll be 3, or some other number, but whatever we can gain by this effort would make more beach accesses available and improve the town's overall position. So, long as it's not, we want this done in 2 weeks, we're okay. We should embark upon this mission and, attempt with the lowest hanging fruit, where there's someone who remembers the association, who, there's some person to work with or whatever, and then perhaps it evolve to the more difficult ones that may or may not move forward.
I think it's actually a great idea
That's a
too.
great idea.
I know there's some other beach accesses that are actually right-of-ways that we have no signage on them. All those around. And maybe be a good idea to reach out to tribal homeowners associations, so they just want to, eliminate the burden of having to maintain the
Exactly.
beach access.
I think maybe contact all of them.
Yeah.
Just the ones that are
Well, now we're having scope creep, so let's start with the narrow issue and work on it, and
I
then we
think
can
it's-
expand from
I
there.
think it's so complicated that maybe we need to put it on a future M&P.
We can do that for starters.
And you guys can gather some info for us. I can provide you, one neighbor provided me with documents for, I think it's Sandpiper Village. They have documents, and that's the other thing, these things are being lost. I looked on the Lee County's website, and I can't find information about a lot of these, but I know they're there. So any association member that has old documents that they may want to provide to us, if we can start getting that word out there, send them to your council member that you know, or drop them off here at Town Hall. And
Yes, Madam Vice Mayor, I think the point of, as the more times we have this on the agenda and we can send a word out to people, hey, we're working on this, if you want to voluntarily participate, or you happen to have a copy of one of these sets of documents in your file from when you acquired, or whatever, or even to people, we want ours, we want to keep it ourselves, and we're not interested at all that will help us sort of assimilate and set this up so it can move forward in some, in a fashion where we could be at least partially successful, if not fully successful.
I'm really concerned about the encroachment issue, because one of them that I went on recently, the condos, neighboring condos have now put sprinklers that are, the sprinkler heads are way out into the access.
Maybe by design, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, well, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Years ago, we had cases like this where they were abandoned or just nobody knew who they were, and the adjoining property owners kind of took them over, and they became theirs. And so there was a lot of that, not a lot, but there was some of that going on, and I think most of that's been untangled, but very good. Anything else?
that's it for me today.
Anybody else have anything to?
I see a couple items down here that are kind of in my court, the Kiwanis bench advertising and the, that, I don't know if that really needs to be on the agenda, because pretty much worked with the Kiwanis and we're moving ahead with a program to redo those.
We're very happy to take it off if that's okay with the rest of you.
I know in the past, council members like to keep their items on there just so they didn't get forgotten. If you feel comfortable taking it off, that's okay.
I feel comfortable taking it off. I mean, it's already gone pretty far down the road, so.
Want to substitute Lions Club with that? Or should we just go with Chelsea?
That's really a very routine item. She just in touch,
Okay.
she gets in touch with Chelsea. We have a program, and
Very good,
we'll explain the rules and the costs, and she could, whether she wants to participate or not.
good.
If you want to promote it too, I know there's a lot of interest. There seems to be a lot of demand for people wanting to put up benches. Even one of the Kiwanis benches, someone redid the back of it with a memorial for somebody. So I don't know, so it's probably good to put that out with our public information.
Program?
To say that this is a program that's going on.
Anything else?
Nope.
If it's the will of the council, I'd like to see if we could add, revisiting future M&P meeting or whatever, the noise ordinance. Went through that again over the last week. And it seems like there's a lot of things in there that could be cleaned up, in my opinion, that could be revisited. I wanted to put it out there to see if the will of the council would be willing to discuss that at a future meeting.
My only comment about that would be that it does create great angst in the community. We had a lot of controversy, a lot of public comment, and what we managed to come up with was a compromise that took a long time to get ironed out. And if we make changes, the group that made concessions to get us to where they were would feel like maybe they'd been left out of the conversation. I chaired the group. The Chamber of Commerce asked me to be the liaison and chair the group about the noise ordinance. I had members from the community as well as the businesses in that group, and came up with suggestions and worked very hard on the noise ordinance. And I understand it's far from perfect, but it was a compromise. So I would hesitate to bring it up again.
Well, I think, I actually had occasion to look at it the other day as well, and it's extremely complicated and difficult to understand. I think at a minimum, it'd be good to look at it for educational purposes, because I don't think a lot of folks in the community know how it works or how it and I think it might be an opportunity to help people understand the process. I appreciate the fact that it's a delicate issue, but the people I was talking with could not decipher a lot of its nuances, and I think maybe that having a forum with John maybe walking us through some of the language might be helpful from an educational standpoint at a minimum. It's my thought.
And the reason I brought it up was conversations with some of the staff that it's something that them in a delicate situation. They're there to enforce what council or previous council has put it on paper that they enforce. They're just doing their jobs. And I mentioned to one of them that I would bring it up because I completely sympathize with that. And I struggled to understand some of it, and I know if I'm struggling, that I'm a scholar by any means, but I can see how it could be difficult for some people to understand.
Fortunately, it's one of those things that you cannot make easy to understand. We tried, we started out that way, and I'll just go back to saying it was a compromise.
It's always a painful thing, but
The staff is never going to be in a good situation, no matter what your noise ordinance is. They're always in a delicate situation with it.
Mr. Mayor and council members, let me say this. We have a sort of a practical situation that's out there that we should probably address. At least put on the table and decide if you want to address it. So it's my understanding some of the businesses in Times Square feel the upper limit in Times Square is too low. And at least maybe other issues out there that I'm not aware of, but that's the one issue that I've just very recently heard about. So the question is, rather than reopen the whole ordinance, perhaps just focus on that narrow issue is, should that one limit be looked at and perhaps adjusted?
They felt that way when we did the ordinance.
I'm hearing you, I'm
So
just
it's
saying.
not new.
I hear you, and clearly, if business A is at the limit and business B wants to be heard as well, or to attract customers, whatever, they're not going to go below that. They're going to obviously try to go above that, and hence, as Councilor Alice mentioned, puts our staff in a position of constantly having to remind them that, you know, there is a limit. We follow the limit established by town council, and the only way to redress, if you will, is to convince the council to adjust that limit.
I think the town manager has appropriately referenced the elephant in the room, and I think that really is the issue. And they've been down there the other day and literally heard one of the performers in front of one of these businesses. As soon as I turned the corner of the building, there was no sound. I couldn't hear anything, and they were technically in violation. So there seems to be this is a unique situation, I think. Obviously, noise violations are extremely controversial, and they're always difficult to wrestle with. I absolutely grant you that. But there's something unique about that Times Square space that I think is worth taking a look at. That's just my opinion.
It's certainly complaint driven, and there have been complaints from the neighborhoods, and somehow it has to be figured out how those businesses that are facing out towards the Gulf of Mexico, how that sound is turning around and going back to these neighborhoods back over here. So I'm not a sound expert, but I can't imagine people that are just waking up in the middle of the night imagining they're hearing these noises.
When I think back to Councilor Allers's point is the ordinance designed, and maybe the vice mayor could help us, does the sound person go, does the enforcement person go to the residence of the person making the complaint? Or do they go to the source of the noise? And if they go to the source of the noise, I'm just saying, just from my own personal experience, I literally went around the corner of the building. I'm still in Times Square. I could not hear anything, yet alone like a slight, so I wonder if some of those residents are hearing music from other businesses. I don't know.
I don't know either.
It is a complicated issue. There's no question about it, but I think it's worth a look, because I think the town enforcement folks are in a tough spot.
Problem is, suggestion was to open it as to one issue, but that never is what happens, because there were people who gave something on that one issue, and if you open up that one issue, then they're going to come back and say, yes, but we made a compromise about that, so you have to open up the other side. You open this up, it's gonna get big, and it's Pandora's box. It is, and I can tell you, hours and hours and hours were spent on it, and if you want to do it, go there. I'm just forewarning you. It's impossible to make everybody happy about this, and we spent hours and weeks crafting compromise. So if you open it up, you will be opening up the whole thing.
Maybe that's the case, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring it up.
I-
And
You're perfectly welcome to do that.
I
I'm just
do think
cautioning you
I-
based on,
I understand your position, and I think our manager hit the nail on the head. Maybe it's the one specific issue. I do think personally there's a couple more, but if that's a starting point, that's a starting point. And if it opens up Pandora's box, I mean, it didn't get elected to sit here to make easy decisions.
and the thing I'm just trying to say is, I would be all in favor of fixing it if I knew there was a way to do it. But this is not a problem that is solvable. It's just so complicated. It's like homelessness. You know, everybody would love to solve that problem, but that's an unsolvable issue. We can make it better, and a bunch of people spent a lot of time trying to craft something to make it better not that long ago. So I'm just cautioning you.
Okay. Anything?
I'm not clear as to where, where we've ended on this. I mean, there's been no
Oh,
direction one way or
I thought
another.
that was easy direction.
I kind of think that, you know, the whole Times Square issues, these restaurants are pretty close together. And to have different bands at different restaurants just want to get louder, really they're just getting louder than their neighbor. It creates a bit of a chaotic thing. It'd be pretty annoying to me as a diner if I'm sitting and listening to two different guys playing two different songs loudly next to me. You know, I understand there probably is not the kind of residential complaints in the area, but between the neighbors that are there that have these restaurants, it seems to me that it can get out of hand pretty quickly.
Therein lies the problem. If you're there taking a reading, which restaurant is going to get the violation, A or B, if they're both playing music?
Oh, I actually asked the manager that.
You know,
Yeah, I really, it's the vice mayor's point, and I'm making up a number. Well, let's just say the current level is 78 decibels. Let's pick a number out of the sky, since I don't know the exact number today.
72.
72. And council, and through let's just say the unanimous consent of all the merchants in Times Square, we have this problem. Let's make it 73. So you all do that. Well, you're back to the same problem that business A is going to turn theirs to 73, business B is going to turn theirs to 73, and you know, you're going to be back in that sort of competition situation. So the vice mayor is right that this is an extremely sticky wicket. There's no right answer. But to the extent that, you know, you may want to try to delve into it and see if there's some undiscovered territory that perhaps wasn't considered the first time around. We're here to support your efforts if you want to go down that path.
So, the councilman is asking if there's any appetite to open the session on the noise ordinance.
I'm willing to hear that. I think we've got a problem. We can. I'm not saying it's an easy problem to solve, but I don't know that we can put our heads in the sand on this particular because it's an ongoing problem. And people's leases and their businesses are at stake at this point, because if they get X number of violations, they're gonna lose their business. It's something we understand, I get everything, but but if we just do nothing, this puts the town enforcement division in a really tough spot. It puts these businesses in a horrible spot. And I don't know that it's a significant problem. I mean, having went down and I'm no sound expert, but I mean, the threshold of 72 in that area is pretty low. And I understand the Pandora's box issue, totally get that, but we've got a problem. I don't know the answer, but we've got a problem. My opinion.
Roger, there's not a special sound level for Times Square. It's every business, right?
Well, that's one of the things, so there's two things. One is the sound level, and then the second thing is penetration. You have, what is the decibel reading X number of feet away from a particular spot, as a threshold, and then you have the number as a threshold. So, to my knowledge, no, there's not a special designation for Times Square.
I can see it coming, what's gonna happen.
I don't really agree with opening it up, because I wasn't a part of this process when it went on, but I remember that there was a lot of people who were affected by the noise, businesses and a lot of businesses who wanted to create more noise, either to attract business or to create the experience for their people. And I appreciate what's been done and been settled. I don't particularly in favor of opening it up again.
I'm not either. There's 3. Sorry, but this will never end. And I understand your appetite to see it again because you haven't seen it. We have seen it, and it ain't pretty. And, the arguments are going to be, this has been an established neighborhood forever, before all those businesses were there. Businesses opened up, creating this noise. There goes my quiet enjoyment of my property. Sure, that's been brought up already. That will be brought up again. And then the businesses will say, well, and they have their arguments as well. And there'll be no agreement. There'll be no agreement on it. I don't foresee it. So I don't have an appetite for it, to be honest. Okay. Anything else on the agenda management? Does anybody else have anything? Hearing none, that will conclude this meeting today.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
You had stepped out for the funeral, but I think, Roger, you were going to disseminate the nuisance abatement board applications at this meeting based upon the vice mayor's recommendation.
We got an email from one person who said that they were in the process of filling out the application or something, so we were just waiting a day or so to see if we got that, but we will do it electronically today.
Okay, thank you.
Is that the email that we received, the application by email, that the person was putting their hat into the ring?
I got an email request to be considered, but we operate on an application, so we then responded to that individual. Please fill out the application, get it back to us as soon as you practically can. And I believe we're still waiting.
I think I have received it.
So now that we have it, we know that they're in, and we will make the list available to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Been great spending so much time with you all this week. And I'd like to say let's do it more often, but I'm not going to say that. It's 1:25. If there's a motion to adjourn, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second. Any objection? The motion carries it. The meeting is adjourned at 1:25.